there's no way in the world I could have seen 12 Grammys and 15 or 20 Stella Awards and all like that.
Yeah.
I could not see this far. And I was taking care of my mother, singing locally.
Yeah.
But no way in the world would I have even phantom in my mind that the Lord would bring me this far.
In April 2026, Shirley Caesar reached the age of 87, but her regular working schedule completely stopped because her assistants canceled all her upcoming performances and issued ticket refunds to the audience. The global music industry recognizes her as the First Lady of Gospel, and the Recording Academy of the United States awarded her 12 Grammy Awards for selling millions of records to her listeners. However, behind these impressive statistical numbers, she carries an enormous burden of personal tragedies that she accumulated over more than 8 decades of her life. From the time she was a 7-year-old girl who watched her family carry her father's dead body on a wooden door to her current state as an 87-year-old woman whispering her final farewells. The entire life of Shirley Caesar has been a continuous sequence of devastating losses. Shirley Caesar was born in the year 1938 in the city of Durham, located in the state of North Carolina, into an extremely large and impoverished household. Her parents produced a total of 13 children over the years, and Shirley occupied the position of the 10th child in this family hierarchy. All 15 family members lived together inside a very cramped house where personal space did not exist, so the children had to share every square meter of the sleeping areas while constantly lacking basic living supplies. Her father, who was named Jim Caesar and known to everyone as Big Jim, worked as a manual laborer at a local tobacco manufacturing plant, where he received an extremely low salary that could not purchase enough food for 15 people. While working at the tobacco plant, he inhaled toxic tobacco dust every single hour, which caused direct and severe physical damage to his lungs and respiratory system. Her mother managed the household duties until a workplace accident at the factory severely injured her leg, which permanently disabled her and severely restricted her physical mobility. Furthermore, their residential building lacked a clean water system, and they survived on meager meals that mainly consisted of cheap grains because they could not afford nutritious food. Because they frequently submitted their rental payments late, the landlord visited their house every month and continuously threatened to evict all 15 family members onto the streets. Under these desperate circumstances, music emerged as their only practical tool for survival, because her father participated in gospel singing and quickly discovered Shirley's natural vocal talent. When she reached the age of 6, Big Jim brought her onto the stage and instructed her to sing, which resulted in loud applause from the audience and prompted him to declare that her singing voice would eventually feed entire nations. However, a catastrophic event occurred in 1946 that completely destroyed the foundational structure of her family. While Big Jim was practicing his singing at home, he suddenly collapsed to the floor because he suffered a massive brain seizure that immediately stopped his heart and caused his sudden death at the age of 42. On the exact day her father died, Shirley was exactly 7 years and 3 months old, and she watched helplessly as her family requested emergency medical assistance. The local hospital received the telephone call, but the dispatchers officially refused to send an ambulance to the scene because hospital policies during that era strictly mandated racial segregation and denied medical transport services to Black families. Consequently, the family had to handle the dead body themselves by removing a wooden door from its hinges and placing Big Jim's corpse directly onto the flat wooden surface. Several men lifted the wooden door and carried the body out of the house while the 7-year-old girl stood by the entrance and watched her father's corpse move through the door frame. The psychological and physical consequences of this specific day negatively affected her life for many subsequent years. Because her father had punished her for a minor mistake just a few days earlier, Shirley mistakenly connected the two events and firmly believed that her father's anger toward her directly caused his fatal brain seizure. Financially, the family permanently lost their only source of monetary income, and because her disabled mother could not perform physical labor, the 13 children immediately faced severe starvation. The daily food rations decreased significantly, which caused one of Shirley's older brothers to collapse from physical exhaustion, and the hospital doctors officially diagnosed him with severe malnutrition. Facing her brother's hospitalization and her mother's physical disability, Shirley decided to use her vocal abilities to generate income, so she officially became the primary financial provider for her entire family, starting at the age of 8. By the time she reached the age of 10, Shirley expanded her labor activities by traveling to various local churches to perform gospel songs in exchange for financial donations from the church members. She collected every single coin and paper banknote from the audience, and at the end of each day, she handed the entire amount of money directly to her mother, who used those funds to pay the monthly house rent and purchase groceries. Because her singing schedule frequently required her to perform on the weekends, she decided to skip her educational classes on Fridays, which directly damaged her academic performance and forced her to miss regular childhood activities. When she turned 12 years old, she signed a professional touring contract with Reverend Leroy Johnson, which expanded her traveling radius far beyond her hometown of Durham and required her to cross multiple state borders. Their primary method of transportation was the Greyhound passenger bus, and they conducted all their traveling during the nighttime hours. Because she did not have access to a proper bed, she sat on the regular passenger seat, rested her head against the window, and slept through the constant vibrations of the moving vehicle until she woke up in a completely unfamiliar city the next morning. This touring process exposed the young girl to severe physical dangers because the southern United States heavily enforced Jim Crow laws during the 1950s, which legally mandated strict racial segregation across all public facilities. Black citizens faced absolute bans from entering white-owned restaurants or using the same public restrooms as white people, and Shirley had to navigate through these hostile environments on a daily basis. Extremist groups of white people frequently appeared during their travels and issued direct violent threats against her touring group, which added immense psychological pressure to her already exhausting schedule. This lifestyle completely disconnected her from normal social interactions because while other 12-year-old children woke up, attended school, played with friends, and ate dinner with their parents, Shirley woke up on a bus and stood before hundreds of adult strangers. She held the microphone, sang through the pre-planned list of songs, received her financial compensation, and mechanically repeated this exact process day after day without any breaks. For Shirley, music lost its entertainment value and transformed into a mandatory survival action because if she stopped singing, her mother would have no money for rent, and her siblings would experience starvation again. Whenever she stepped into the stage lights, Shirley presented a positive energy and smiled for the audience, but as soon as she left the platform, she withdrew into herself and hid the intense fear of a child operating in the dangerous southern states. She completely suppressed her physical muscle pains from sleeping on bus seats and forced herself to function as a fully grown adult because she carried the financial responsibility of 15 people on her young shoulders. During the year 1957, when Shirley Caesar was 19 years old and studying as a university student at North Carolina College, she experienced a profound spiritual event that altered her entire career path. She reported hearing a supernatural voice that she firmly identified as the voice of God, and this voice specifically instructed her to dedicate her entire life to full-time religious service. Without any hesitation, Shirley submitted her official withdrawal paperwork to the university administration, permanently closed the door on her bachelor's degree, and accepted an invitation to join the famous gospel music group called the Caravans. Because the group based its operations in the city of Chicago, Shirley packed her personal belongings, purchased a train ticket, and traveled alone away from her familiar hometown of Durham. This relocation required her to physically separate from her disabled widowed mother, leave behind the cramped family house with her siblings, and establish an independent life in a massive industrial city. Her working period with the Caravans severely drained her physical stamina because the music group signed numerous performance contracts that resulted in an extremely crowded tour schedule across the country. They traveled constantly by automobile from one state to another, and Shirley had to sing for many consecutive days, which pushed her physical body to its absolute limits of endurance. Even when she suffered from severe colds or extreme physical exhaustion, she never canceled a scheduled appearance, always arrived precisely on time, and completely finished every vocal performance assigned to her. Concurrently with her group activities, her personal name gained massive popularity, and various independent churches started sending her private invitations to deliver solo preaching sermons. Shirley accepted these additional requests by dividing her daily schedule, which meant she prepared her personal sermons during the daytime and performed with her musical group during the evening hours. This volume of work vastly exceeded normal physical limitations and created a severe internal psychological conflict despite the massive success of her professional career. The Caravans sold massive quantities of records, royalty payments flowed into her bank accounts, and magazines printed her name on their pages. But her personal isolation increased simultaneously. The geographical distance between Chicago and Durham prevented her from visiting her mother frequently, and she found herself surrounded only by professional business partners who viewed her as a spiritual leader. These people expected her to provide them with emotional strength, which placed immense pressure on her brain because she could not cry in front of her congregation or complain about her extreme fatigue. Consequently, she locked her deep feelings of loneliness inside her mind and maintained an external image of absolute strength while silently sacrificing her personal well-being for her religious mission. Because Shirley was born as the 10th child, she had 9 older siblings and 3 younger siblings, and as time progressed, their biological bodies naturally aged and developed various fatal illnesses. Beginning in the 1960s, the family members started dying one by one, and Shirley constantly received telephone calls delivering the news of another sibling's death. Each time she received a death notification, she booked an airplane ticket, traveled back to her hometown, and attended the funeral services to bury her brothers and sisters. First, she buried an older brother, and a few years later, she attended the funeral of an older sister, creating a tragic cycle of receiving death notices, purchasing wooden coffins, and standing in front of cemetery graves that repeated continuously for several decades. The final mathematical result of this tragic process was that all 12 of her siblings passed away before her, and not a single brother or sister managed to live longer than she did. The entire group of 13 children who had once crowded into that small wooden house was completely eradicated by death, leaving Shirley Caesar as the sole surviving member of her entire generation. The ultimate collapse of her physical and emotional support system occurred in the year 1986, when her disabled mother finally passed away. From the time Shirley was 8 years old, every single financial action she performed was dedicated to her mother because she physically handed her performance money to her, paid her medical hospital bills, and eventually purchased a comfortable house for her. Her mother served as her most loyal audience member and provided the fundamental motivation for Shirley to continue signing exhausting touring contracts throughout her adult life. When the medical doctor officially announced that her mother had stopped breathing, Shirley's core motivation shattered completely. And standing in front of her mother's dead body broke through all the psychological defense mechanisms she had built over the years. The contrast between her massive public fame and her painful reality reached its maximum point during this period because she had numerous Grammy trophies in her glass cabinets and record-breaking ticket sales. However, when the loud concerts ended and she returned to her private residence, she had no brother to call her on the telephone, no sister to share her personal secrets, and no mother waiting for her in the living room. She directly addressed the media reporters with a factual statement, saying that she was the very last person remaining from her family, which officially confirmed her state of absolute personal isolation. She realized that global fame could not generate biological human beings, and massive amounts of money in her bank accounts could not purchase back a single blood relative. A significant change in her marital status happened in the year 1983, when Shirley Caesar signed an official marriage certificate and became the legal wife of Bishop Harold Ivory Williams. On the day they organized their wedding ceremony, Shirley was 44 years old, while Bishop Harold was 64 years old, which meant her husband was exactly 2 decades older than her. The general public viewed this union as a late-stage romance, but for Shirley, Bishop Harold provided a completely new family structure that successfully replaced the biological relatives she had lost to death. He became a solid foundational pillar for her life as they lived together under the same roof and worked collaboratively at the Mount Calvary Word of Faith Church. The church administration board officially appointed both of them as co-pastors, which allowed them to divide the massive workload of managing the religious facility and its members. While he planned the financial budgets and organizational strategies, she directed the worship ceremonies, and together they significantly expanded the size of their religious congregation. When she returned home from work, she finally had a physical person sitting across from her at the dining table who patiently listened to her discuss her professional problems. The physical presence of her husband successfully filled the massive emotional void that the deaths of her 12 siblings and her mother had created in her daily life. Unfortunately, the cycle of tragedy restarted in the year 2014 when Bishop Harold experienced a severe decline in his physical health due to advanced old age, and his bodily functions permanently shut down. He passed away, and his official death certificate recorded his final age at 93 years old, concluding their marriage exactly 31 years after they signed their wedding documents. After the funeral ceremony concluded, Shirley Caesar delivered a statement describing how her entire world had collapsed because the family structure she had carefully rebuilt over 3 decades was instantly destroyed. At the age of 76, she found herself standing entirely alone once again without her co-pastor, which forced her to independently approve all church decisions and manage all charity operations without any assistance. When the nighttime arrived, she faced the absolute silence of her empty bedroom because she no longer possessed any living blood relatives, and the cemetery workers had already buried her legally wedded husband. In addition to experiencing physical losses through death, Shirley Caesar suffered severe psychological attacks from the public media and internet platforms over several decades. Anonymous individuals began creating rumors regarding her private life and sexual orientation during the 1980s, and tabloid newspapers printed these unverified claims, which spread rapidly throughout the religious community. In the year 2017, while she was standing on her church pulpit delivering a speech about a sensitive social topic, an audience member recorded a video and distributed it across the global internet. A massive section of the public reacted with extreme negativity, publishing thousands of critical comments that created a widespread boycott movement against her professional brand. This intense public backlash directly damaged her professional reputation significantly reduced the number of people attending her religious ceremonies, and placed a massive obstacle in front of her pastoral mission. Following these social controversies, internet networks began producing malicious fake news regarding her physical existence by publishing articles that falsely declared Shirley Caesar had died. Other internet articles falsely claimed that she suffered from terminal stage cancer, and these cycles of fake news erupted massively in 2023, repeated again in 2024, and continued into 2025. Thousands of concerned individuals continuously telephoned her church office to verify these reports, which forced Shirley Caesar to manually handle the situation by turning on her video camera and recording direct statements. She had to publicly announce that she was still alive and had not died, but every single clarification video required her to expend valuable physical energy, and these continuous fake news attacks caused severe psychological exhaustion. As she transitioned into the years 2025 and 2026, her actual physical body began broadcasting genuine warning signals because she had been performing manual and vocal labor continuously since she was 8 years old. After nearly 80 years of utilizing her vocal cords and traveling constantly, her musculoskeletal system severely weakened, and her overall physical stamina dropped to dangerously low levels. Event organizing companies had prepared her upcoming tour schedules, but just a few days before the events were supposed to happen, her personal assistants sent official notices canceling all the shows. She completely disappeared from public events, withdrew from all social media platforms, and significantly altered the vocabulary she used when communicating with her closest associates. She completely removed long-term future words from her sentences and deliberately inserted words like goodbye and final into her daily conversations. Her medical records currently contain a highly serious clinical diagnosis, and her doctors have provided a specific medical treatment plan. But she has strictly locked down this information and issued orders forbidding anyone from leaking her pathology status to the public. Despite suffering continuous emotional pain, her financial economy grew massively from her successful tours, and her bank accounts registered extremely large monetary numbers. Because she deeply remembered her impoverished childhood, Shirley established a permanent financial rule that automatically deducted exactly 50% of her total revenue from all her musical tours. She transferred this massive amount of money directly into social charity funds, which utilized the cash to purchase nutritional food and distribute essential household items to low-income individuals. She executed this financial action continuously because she possessed actual factual data about physical hunger, having personally watched her brother lie in a hospital bed due to severe malnutrition. She extracted her money to ensure that other modern children would not have to survive on the cheap grains that she was forced to eat during her childhood. However, her family structure lacked one fundamental biological element, because she never produced any children during her entire 31-year marriage to her husband. Her medical reproduction records remain completely empty, meaning she possesses no biological children. Her husband is dead, and her 12 siblings are dead. The absence of biological heirs created a severe disconnect in her life, because as she ages, she has no younger generation to provide her with physical care, and her large house lacks the sounds of children. This profound emptiness is a harsh physical reality, and as she enters the age of 87, this extreme lack of family presence fills every single corner of her residence. Shirley Caesar currently stores 12 Grammy trophies in her house, and her professional sales data indicates millions of records sold. But summarizing the factual data of her life proves she is a profound victim of endless loss. The event of her father's death, when she was 7 years old, initiated her long list of tragedies. The process of burying 12 siblings extended that list, and signing the death certificate of her husband finalized her absolute personal isolation. Currently, she is confronting terrible medical reports and the natural biological deterioration of her aging system while dealing with the heavy burden of her past. All her massive musical achievements stand upon a brutal foundation of suffering because reaching millions of global listeners required her to sacrifice her entire childhood and sleep on moving bus seats. She abandoned her university education, sang while physically exhausted, and financed her entire family by draining her own biological health while maintaining a massive void in her personal living space. The volume of Shirley Caesar's singing voice is currently decreasing, her performance contracts are canceled, and her touring schedule remains completely empty. But her documented actions provide exact evidence of human physical and mental endurance. From the wooden door that carried her father's corpse to the final words of goodbye, she whispers at the age of 87. The life of Shirley Caesar strictly reminds us that even the most powerful individuals carry deep wounds that never permanently heal.